welcome to Pop Cult X Talking Ted. I'm Danny, and along with Tori, we're here to chat all things Ted Lasso. This week, it's episode 7, The String That Binds Us. Now, just the title alone, I should have known something humorous was coming, but I wasn't prepared for what they gave us this week. And it was... I mean, if you remember last week, everyone, we were both excited to see the implementation of total football into the Richmond team. And they did implement it, and it was exciting, but it also was hilarious. But there was more to it than that. So, Tori, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What was the first most memorable moment of the episode for you?
Oh, man. So they're strategizing, right? They're trying to figure out how they're going to make total football work. Mm-hmm. And Coach Beard gives this hilarious presentation, which on Twitter was like, did Apple go over budget on this one? Because they seem to cut the lights a lot. Like people noticed that this was a more moody episode and it was more in the dark, which I just thought was so funny. Another long one. It's like 56 minutes.
Yeah.
But he talks about Roy's going to make it real dark, and then Coach Beard's going to shed some light. Just a cute little play on words there. And he goes through this hilarious presentation talking about where total football came from, and then how the most famous person who used it was Pep, and he's now a coach in the Premier League, as we know, a very famous coach. Coaches for Manchester City.
The White Whale. Mm-hmm.
The White Whale, who played for them, a very wonderful Jamie Tart. So they kind of crap for that. And they're just going through this presentation, talking about how they're going to implement this. And right off the bat, Ted's like, we're going to do this. We're going to do it now. And we're going to implement it for the next game. You can see there's sort of a rift between the team. Like, they're not ready for it. But Ted tells them to just hush their butts. They're going to go try it.
Hush your butt.
Hush your butts. I think he said it like 20 million times.
Yeah.
But they go outside, they start doing it, trying to figure out how to implement this. Mostly they're just conditioning, it seems like, for the first couple of days.
Whistle.
Yeah. And then eventually, I guess we'll fast forward just a little bit. They end up inviting the 3 bar guys, right? The 3 pub guys to come out and watch, because apparently the pub guys think they've gotten soft on Ted.
Yeah.
They said they humanized him. They felt bad for him. Now they're kind of friends. So they're going to backslide, and they, call him and he invites them to practice. So I'll let you take it away. What happens at the first practice that the fans get to come to, which was probably one of the funniest moments in Ted Lasso, all 3 seasons, I would argue.
Yeah. Well, so I think they started the 3 chaps from the pub came, and that's when they did the first conditioning drill, the running, and everyone was just throwing up toward the end, right? So that was they were just puking everywhere, and the guys were like, that's some good puking. So I thought that was funny that they were being like the peanut gallery in a way, right? So they were just chatting about that. And then I guess the next practice comes, and now more fans are showing up. So I thought that was an interesting look at it, is that like he's opening practice up to the city, because I thought there was a line in there that he said, like, oh, this is their team. We're just borrowing it for a little bit. And I thought that line was so special and so well written, because if you think about it, it's true. The team belongs to the city, and those fans have invested their time, their money, their blood sometimes, especially with like after like football riots or scrums, and the coaches are just there for a fleeting brief moment of it. So I thought that line was perfect.
Oh, it was so good. So perfect. And just, it kind of scared me, because it's like, oh no, that they're going to leave at some point, right? Is it a foreshadowing that they're leaving sooner than we want? I don't know, but just a beautiful connection and understanding of Ted knowing his place.
Yeah.
And Beard, although knows it, maybe not so willing to accept it, but understanding, like, you're right, we are just sort of borrowing the team for him. And I thought that was such a great quote too. Good catch.
Yeah. And then to continue on the training, now the next day more people are there, and they're doing versatility, where they have to like switch positions with the player and whatnot, which is fine on the field, but it extended off the field as well. So we see Coach Beard and Will the Kit Man also switch places. And Will the Kit Man, the actor who played him, that was hilarious
It's
when
so
he
good.
had on a cardboard or paper beard on and everything. And then he said, "Let's go, baby!" It was just so.
Oh, baby!
and
Yeah,
then
that's great.
and then of course at the end of that day, they revert back and like Beard comes in like, "Get out of my chair," and it was just it was funny. But I think the funniest thing that happened next was awareness, right? You have to be aware of where your players are at. So they used a Japanese proverb, or was it a proverb or just like a tradition, or where you're connected to your soulmate by an invisible red string.
Right.
Of course, this being, Ted Lasso, they made it a visible red string that wasn't attached to each other's finger, but attached to their another player's ding dong, as Ted Lasso put it.
I was wondering how you were going to say that. I was like, I'll let it start.
And, okay, so Coach Roy Kent, decides that it'd be more fun and hilarious if the strings were attached to two players' ding dongs. And I think I laughed the most during this little 5 minute segment that I have maybe the whole season so far. And it was just childish humor, but it was just so funny.
It
I
was
mean,
so good.
just everything around it, them tugging it, and especially if you're a male out there and the pain that could inflict. And then you see Danny Rojas running up close to Jamie Tartt, like, "Give him some room. I can't. I'm too afraid."
Too afraid. I know. I'm like, I obviously cannot feel this or imagine, but in my head, I can probably imagine doesn't feel great.
No.
Of course, they're being super careful, and
Yeah.
everyone in the stands is kind of like, what's happening? But just, Ted and Beard are watching. Roy is
And he's just
up. This is one of
he's just laughing.
that we see a Roy Kent smile. This might be the first time we've seen him laugh the entire show, because he knows just sort of how evil, this
Mm-hmm.
twist on that Japanese proverb was.
It was just
He
a demonic laughter.
was. Yeah, just like he knows exactly how it's gonna go, right? And then what ends up happening?
And then all of a sudden we hear a loud snap, because I guess one of the players, their rope got too far extended. Then everyone stops because it was loud enough to make everyone on the field stop, and they all look back at Jamie Tartt, and he's just standing there looking down, and we see a empty string just going across the floor.
And the loop, they pick up the loop and they're like, which, by the way, I'm not sure if this was on purpose or not, but in my head, I was kind of like, that's kind of a small loop. Like, maybe that was just me, but I'm just saying, I didn't know if there was going to be like a small joke or something, but it looked a little smaller than I thought it would be.
It had to be lassoed tight, right? So it had to be noosed tight or whatever. So imagine
yes.
So if it's that tight and it pulls off, you can imagine the pain that must have inflicted. And so they wrap up that part of practice right there. And as Ted Lasso's walking forward, he walks in between two strings of two other players, and it pulls them forward and makes them lurch to the ground. And of course, the funniest part of that was Roy Kent's off there in the corner, just laughing his butt off about all of it. And oh man, it was just well done. I really enjoyed that. The physical comedy of it, even though, like I said, it was maybe childish, but still, I had fun with that.
If you didn't laugh, I would seriously wonder if because that was just freaking good writing, good comedy there. That was funny. So, fast forward past that, we did skip some important parts. The beginning of the show, obviously that was the most memorable part to us too, probably. But the very beginning of the show starts off with Miss Keely Jones and now boss turned lover / girlfriend. We're sort of getting an inside look into their relationship that is clearly moving forward here. And we sort of see that Jack, the boss, the girlfriend,
well, is don't stop right there.
Oh, sorry.
Is
Go
she
ahead.
is she the boss though? Because she's an investor into Keely's firm.
That's right. And Keely even says that. She says she's the investor. So is it technically boss? I don't know where the line is right there.
Well, I would say no, she's not the boss because she doesn't work there. She doesn't do
Fair,
anything with the firm. She just bankrolls it, so to speak.
fair. Okay, so we'll investor.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're on a date, and she is starting to give Keely less room and more gifts.
Hmm.
And we just start seeing Keely get a little overwhelmed
Yeah.
by the what Rebecca later calls love
Love
bombing.
bomb. Yeah,
And
she did.
I think it's a very interesting conversation that Rebecca and Keely have later in the show. Well, I'll get to that in a second. So eventually Barbara sort of finds out, hey,
Hmm.
they're more just investor and, you know, a business owner,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And Keely is kind of backtracking, like, oh well, we got breakfast together. Oh, it wasn't breakfast, it was coffee,
Just
but we grew up
coffee.
together. And Jack comes out in front of the entire office and she's like, hey everybody, we're dating. I just want you guys to know we are together and I'm serious about it. And Jack kind of makes this declaration declaring sort of
Hmm.
her Keely in front of all the coworkers. Um, and we just see this weird look on Barbara's face, which we can get to later. But I kind of have a feeling that Barbara is like skeptical. I don't think she's the biggest in this relationship, or maybe what the Twitterverse is saying is maybe she's seen this before, and Jack
Oh.
involved with previous, people that she's invested in, and it
Hmm.
didn't go well. And so a lot of people on the Twitterverse are kind of like they don't like Jack. They're getting bad vibes. And I kind of started getting bad vibes this episode too. I'm not gonna lie. But it's weird because I almost like Barbara better now. And I was like, maybe is she just looking out for Keely? I don't know. Regardless, she makes this announcement. Everyone's kind of like happy, except for Barbara. We see this kind of strange look on her face, but moves
Hmm.
on. And clearly Keely and Rebecca are still best friends. They talk about it. And Rebecca talks about how what Jack is doing is very similar to what Rupert
Yeah.
first did her when they started dating. He would buy her all these expensive gifts. He bought her so many flowers that their florist was able to buy a castle. That was
Yeah,
that's a lot of flowers.
that
Um,
is.
and so you get this weird sense of just weariness maybe about Jack after this conversation with Rebecca about what are Jack's intentions. Is she being compared to Rupert? That's never a good thing. So
No.
a lot of us are sort of confused on what's going to happen here with Keely and Jack. And as we go throughout the episode, we see Jack keeps love bombing her, and Keely seems very uncomfortable. Flowers and then a ring in her croissant.
Mhm.
It's just very. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, like you, it seems kind of over the top, but I guess just maybe that's just the way Jack expresses herself, and
Could be.
and it's just I don't know. It seems like toward the end of the episode when Keely speaks her mind about it, and I'd be curious to see how Jack responds to that. They go to dinner at, of course, Nate Shelley's favorite restaurant, Taste of Athens, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That was cute. That was
Yeah.
cute.
And she says, "Oh, look, the best table in the house." And then Jack responds with, "Oh, you're love bombing me." Right. So because, it was Keely had to pay. It was her way of
Yes.
treating Jack, which I thought
Yes.
was cool because, you don't always want to be the recipient. Sometimes it feels good to give back and give to others. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where they're going to go with that.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that Barbara, though, just to circle back to that real quick, I think she really um, maybe even has a thing for Jack.
Oh, you think it's like a jealousy thing, maybe?
Yeah, because I mean, if you look back at other episodes, she's always with Jack. Whenever she's around, she wants to be there with her. Kind of tries to make her laugh. As all the
Yeah.
attention is on her, and
Yeah.
more so than just like a a boss or a type of like, I want to impress you because you're, you have power or whatever. But I think it's more, could be more than that.
You know what? I did think that in previous episodes. I didn't think that so much this time, but I did have that thought originally. And that's why she was laughing so hard at Rebecca's jokes too. Cause she's like, well, if
Hmm.
I get Jack's attention, I'll get Rebecca's. I did kind of think that too a little bit there. So that's a good point. Um, I think another one is when you look at the snow globes, there's a lot of them. And she talks
Yeah.
about how she moves around a lot.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering why has she moved around so much with Jack? But yeah, it's kind of like it's a little suspicious now as to why do you have so many snow globes? Why have you moved around a lot?
Right.
Is it because there were scandals like with Jack? Like what's the deal? I don't know.
That's true.
That's kind of some hints that I also saw in this other Ted Lasso group that I'm a part of. I mean, people catch so many small details that I don't even think twice about. But so I think could totally be jealousy. She could be in love with her as well, or it could be something darker, deeper, or we could
Hmm.
just both overthinking and it could be nothing. She's a great person. No, you just never know with these
Yep.
shows.
Very true. Very true. One question I did want to ask you, because something I noticed on Twitter was a lot of from a couple different female writers, and I wanted to get your perspective. How do you think the Ted Lasso writing crew has been treating the women of Ted Lasso this season?
Oh, treating them as in like their storylines
So their
or
storyline, yeah, I guess so. Their storylines, how have they been doing service to the characters this season? Because I've been reading a lot of negative reviews
negative.
on it. Yeah.
You know what? I'm kind of one of them.
Okay.
I I know that this show is mostly about Ted and the football team. I get it.
Hmm.
But as a woman, I'm very clearly invested in the women of the show. And I
Okay.
think season 1 did a great job at uplifting these two wonderful women and making them better. Not necessarily changing who they are, but cutting out all the crap that that pain clearly turned them into, and then just unveiling who they really were underneath. I think season 1 was the best in terms of how the writers and their character development went. Season 3, I feel like it's kind of made them pathetic a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't see Rebecca being, pardon my language, a boss ass bitch anymore. You know, we don't see her being this really strong woman who doesn't need anyone. Um, which we saw in season 2 and the end of season 1 when she finally was like, I don't need Rupert.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now the show's kind of made them both dependent on finding somebody, and that's the only way that they can be happy is finding somebody to love and not like this independent journey. So I really liked where Keely was going, very strong business owner, and just like really making her way in the world from party girl to she's going to be her own boss
Mm-hmm.
to now you're hooking up with your investor. I just don't think her storyline's doing her service right now, honestly. And that's my opinion. You can take it or you can leave it. And then Rebecca, she just seems so, and I get divorce is hard, but just seems so pathetic a little bit and lonely this season. I think her shining moment was following Zava into the bathroom.
I can see
And
that.
and that was kind of her best moment this season. But the whole storyline with this Dutch guy and being swept off her feet or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not where I thought their stories would go. I think Keely, the writers could have done better for her. So
Okay.
I'm with you a little bit.
No, that's fair
Sorry.
enough. I mean,
There.
no, it's fine. I mean, I wasn't sure because I get what people are saying because I read through their articles that they wrote, and what you said mimics that. And but at the same time, that's why I wanted to ask you because from a male perspective, I'd be like, oh, you know what? Maybe their priorities can shift, and the writers, some of the writers are in the writers' room that wrote the episodes are female, so that's their voices. So it's good to hear your thoughts. So thank you.
Yeah, it can go either way. The story's not over, right?
Yeah.
We're still in with it. So we could think their story's going one way, and I could eat my words next week. So have too much commentary on it until we're at the end. But as of right now, I don't think their storylines are giving the characters quite the justice that I thought they deserved. So we'll see how it goes. That's a tough question.
Yeah. And I think, once the season ends and we can look back at it and we can see, okay, did their journey make sense for the character? Okay, so we'll wait and see and answer that question at the end.
Yes. Also, by the way, just a book nerd thing. I cannot believe that they ruined a first edition Jane Austen book. One of the best books ever written. Also, I think indicative and metaphorical of the show. So if you look at the story, ever read that book or seen the movie, which Keely hilariously thinks is better than the book, you can see some similarities between the book and the show.
Interesting.
So, there's a grumpy guy who, she thinks she wants the rich and powerful suitor and leaves this very grumpy, sort of boring, mediocre looking guy for the rich person who ends up having a scandal. If we look at the episode, Keely gets into some sort of scandal at work, aka probably Jack. Sense and Sensibility, that character ends up going back to the grumpy old man, realizing that's what she wanted and fulfilled her in the first place. And Mr. Rich hottie toddy guy wasn't all she thought it would be. The other main character ends up with the person who sort of was a friend, never really thought would be a love interest, but it turns out their friendship was sort of so strong that they both realized time. So could that be a metaphor for Ted and Rebecca? I don't know. I'm just saying, as someone who read the book in high school, 10 years ago, that's what in my head, I'm like, weird that they would bring that up in this show. And then I was like, wait a sec. There's some similarities there.
I see.
Will that book become sort of important? I don't know.
That's interesting.
That was my very quick, what were those things that people used to use to cheat on reading tests?
The Cliff Note version?
Cliff Notes. Yeah, that was my Cliff Note without any character names or details at all. So don't use that to try to pass your test, because you definitely will not pass your test with that enough.
So people Googling Sense and Sensibility will not find that useful. Okay.
Probably not. Very, very overall arching theme there in connection with. So that was a fun little gift, I thought, that they gave. But moving on, another important thing, Sam and his response towards bigotry and racism and immigration, all very much issues that we face here in the US. If you want to kind of, talk about that, I thought that was a really important theme for this episode too.
It really was. And I think, and it all happened over Twitter, which I thought was hilarious because, that's how things happen in the real world too. But of course, things that happen on Twitter often or sometimes have real world consequences, as Sam learned through the vandalization of his restaurant. So Sam, when he first learns about the treatment of the refugees, he tweets back to her saying, we could be better than this. Because Sam represents that eternal optimism and hope and looking for the best in everyone. So he does that. Of course, she fires back, go shut up and go play football. And don't worry about politics.
Supposedly the prime minister?
Not the prime minister, the secretary of interior, basically. So
right. But a politician nonetheless.
A politician, yes. And of course, so he answers back, I'd rather be a mediocre ball player than a world-class bigot. And of course, after that response, that's when his restaurant gets vandalized. And it's very unsettling to Sam. We see a side of his character that we haven't seen, where he goes into the locker room and he just goes on a tirade, a well-deserved and justified tirade But everyone's like in shock and awe of that happening and that occurring because they've never seen this from him before.
Yeah.
This and he gives a reason why, and just how the world is just so evil, and those people are out there destroying things based on what he said, and because he's a footballer, and that's what they love about him is that he can play football, and it's just it was very powerful and emotional, and I think the actor who came in and not saved the day but kind of settled Sam was Sam's father.
Yes.
And I need to look up who the actor was, but he was such a impending force. He filled the room when he
Yes.
walked into it. And I thought that was so wonderful. And the actor who played him, he just did a great job of just commanding that space and like all eyes on him. And he just lived up to that billing of being this wise father figure to Sam. And I thought it was so great. And I especially thought it was great when Sam's father and Ted got to meet.
Finally.
Mm-hmm. Because
I don't
there's
know,
these.
like a colliding of two planets almost. It was such
Mm-hmm.
a it was a moment that I think has been building up since season 1,
Yeah,
Uh
that's true.
Sam talking about my dad's really happy that I'm on this team and that you're my coach. He sees how you take care of us. And, that's a big reason why Ted kept Jamie on the team because Jamie didn't have a dad. That was good. And, there's just been so many references towards Sam's dad. He talks to him on the phone when he's deciding whether he's going to stay or leave. So we
Mm-hmm.
know the figure he is in Sam's life. And we know that he reveres Ted. And so to see both of them in the room, two great father figures, which is what this whole show's about,
Mm-hmm.
finding was almost, on a Greco-Roman level.
Yeah.
It felt like something we've been leading up to this whole time. We also see Sam's father run into Rebecca. I out Sam has probably told, and he makes it real awkward. He's very
Mm-hmm.
kind, of course, but makes it real awkward, and Rebecca knows it. Later in the car, we see them driving together, and he's like, "Oh, I met your boss," and he was like, "Oh," and he was like, "Of course." But I mean, the guy just came in like a hurricane, just swept
Yeah.
everybody's feet, really changed the aura of the room. And I thought his most powerful quote that he said, he said a lot of great things, but I think
Mm-hmm.
the thing that stood out to me the most was, "Hey, Sam, there's bad people in the world, right? Don't fight back, fight
Fight
forward."
forward. Yeah.
And I think that Sam is going to take that. I mean, what great advice. I mean, shoot, if I would have learned that when I was in high school, probably would not have been in trouble so many times. But it's just, I think that he's going to use that philosophy on the field. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what the whole team needs to hear. So,
Mm-hmm.
him and Ted meet. Ted, yeah, you like American candy? Let's go get some food. And he's like, of course. Just, it felt like good synergy was happening. Like the team's coming together. That takes us back to the field, right? Where they actually play the game. They're down, right? 3-0 by
Mm-hmm.
half. They're losing 3-0. And it does not seem like they're figuring it out. And they go into the locker room, they're talking, and everyone's just blaming Jamie. And Jamie's sitting there like, hey, like, okay, whatever. He's just kind of taking it. But then Coach and them stand up, and Coach has this brilliant speech where he talks about Howie's mustache.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was one of the coolest speeches he's given so far. Basically, he was inspired by a comedy group. We'll skip the details because it's a long story. He tried a lot of other facial hair, mixtures before deciding on the mustache. But the main theme of the story was sometimes a good decision is hidden behind a bunch of bad.
Yeah.
Right? So he had to go through a bunch of bad facial hairs styles to get to the good one. And we kind of see Trent Krim being like, you know what? I kind of dig that message. Like, I see what you're doing here, coach. And finally, Jamie stands up and he's like, look, our bad decisions here, coach, is nobody else knows how to run this correctly. Everyone else is doing this wrong. I don't want to say it. I don't want to be the prick here. And they all flip him off.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell us what's going on. So he's like, look, y'all are doing it wrong. Don't go to me. Don't pass to me. Pass through me. Right. So he's like, use me as sort of the sacrifice, and I'm going to pass the ball off to everybody else. That's how you play this type of
football.
And so they go and they're like, oh, Danny thinks, oh my gosh, we figured out what number 4 is. Number 4 in total football is sacrifice. And coach is like, nope, that's not it. But whatever. And Trent's trying to figure out what number 4 is this whole time. I loved him in this episode. So anyways, they go out back onto the field. They play the second half. And for the first time, we see the Richmond team that we knew was always there. You know, the Richmond team, the good decisions that were hidden behind the bad ones. They are flowing real nicely. They end up scoring a goal. And it's the first glimmer of hope that we see, like, hey, old Richmond is back. Like, we can do this. So they end up losing the game. But, you know, they figured out total football. So I think we're going to see a very different Richmond team kind of out and about after this, once they really figure out, hey, we are a team here. We got to trust each other.
Yeah. Completely agree. And you mentioned Trent and how you loved him in this episode, and so did I. His dorkish enthusiasm was just off the charts, and I loved at the end of the match he comes in, he's like, "It's gonna work." It was just so wonderful to see that, and then he gives his explanation why it's gonna work, about 1,000 imperceptible moments, all leading up to one grand finale of the Lasso way, right? So I thought it was just so perfect. And of course, you know, Roy says, "What a dork." And then Ted's like, "Yeah, but he's our dork." So I think it's so cool how they embraced him and made him part of the team, like we said earlier in the season. So I think that was so funny and so cool.
It was. And I think what's even more important is not just his reaction, but what he said, right? I think we were meant to hate Trent at the beginning of this, right? He was the journalist. And everyone sort of hates, we talked about this a long time ago, everyone sort of hates the media right now because they're out to get you and fake news and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, that's not necessarily the truth. And we see Trent was just sort of doing his job, calling out this American coach that came to coach the Premier League in a place where he really belonged. So going from that to his first memoir, which was, well, you know, this guy is here, and do I think the team's going to get relegated? Yeah. But turns out this guy's actually a really great guy. So I'm not going to gloat what happens, you know, and that's the first time we see that. And then we go into what happened just now. He's not a journalist anymore. He's writing a book on the team. And he's really feels like he's a part of the team now. And he is. Yeah. And for him to say what he said in the very first press conference to what he's saying now is huge. I mean, he's seen the team in their worst. He's seen the team in their best with Zava. And now he's like, I think that quote was more for us, the audience. Like, hey, this season has been, but it's going to be okay. It's all going to work out. This goes back to Ted's, we're in the dark forest right now, but we're going to get out of it. So, you know, I think Trent said that, yes, to Ted and the team, but I think he was also saying that to us, be like, hey, keep watching. It's going to get better. And he said the Lasso way, right? Yeah. It's not going to work because you changed tactics this week, right? It's going to work because you've been building trust and confidence and an atmosphere of love, essentially, and trust between the team over 3 seasons. And Ted's kind of like, yeah, I know. That's what I've been trying to do here. You know, like the whole time, bro. You're just not. But he's more like, it's very obvious that Trent is seeing it isn't about wins or losses. It's about making the team better men and better people. So I love that. I love that quote. Like I said, I think it was for us. Keep watching, people. It's going to get better. The Lasso way will work. I agree. One thing real quick, you talked about when Coach Ted was talking about the facial hair quote, and we see Beard, Lasso, and Roy standing up there at the front of the locker room. And then Roy gives his little comments, and he's like, "What have you turned me into?" I just thought that was so funny. He's like a couple shiny dressed men, and then ass squash, and it was just so hilarious. Just putting in the little one-liners that Ted used to do. You can see that shit's rubbing off on Roy. He knows it. He's like, what have you done to me?
Exactly.
Stop. But that just shows how much of an impact Coach Lasso has had, you know? I mean, it's just, we saw Jamie doing the bingo ringo or whatever, bingo El Ringo. He's just rubbing off on the team. And how beautiful is that to know that you're making impact? Goes back to Trent's point. This didn't just happen overnight. Like, this happened over 3 years of pouring into these guys. So
Exactly.
You know, I think that those little tiny moments just show you, like, when you're a good mentor, or even if you're a bad mentor, we see Rupert pouring out himself into Nate's negative, which we need to talk about his character arc in this too. We should probably wrap up after that.
Yeah.
But you know, goes to show that who you are and how you treat people affects them and sticks with them, you know, and it can change better or for worse. And at the very end of the episode, we see it changes them for the better, because not only did they lose the game, but Sam brings his dad to the restaurant anyways, who was his VIP. And, you know, he expects to see it all torn up and broken. But what happens? The whole team is in there after the game, cleaning it up. You know, they're family. And so they're helping him clean up the shop. And, you know, of course, Bumbercatch is fixing the LED
neon light. Yeah.
You know, they're all there because it's the love that they have for each other, and it's the family, the familyness that I don't even know if familyness is a word. Probably not. It is now. Build in them, and then just knowing it's okay to not be perfect. They say, you know, do we want to fix the mirrors? And Sam goes, no, leave them shattered. It's a good reminder that, you know, perfect isn't always what's best. You know, it's okay. Perfect. And we then learn, you know, his dad's name is Ola. So that's why he named the restaurant after his dad. They end up cooking for the whole team, and he meets the chef Simi, who I think might be a little love interest for our boy Sam. So that just shows how far the team has come and how much of an impact Ted has had on them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was a great moment seeing the team there. Although I kind of figured that was going to happen, just knowing how the players are and how much, like you said, they are a family now. And I think that's what you said, Ted Lasso has instilled in them. So they see what the moment has called for and they acted on it. So I also think Jamie Tart is becoming quite a leader in the clubhouse. And I find that fascinating. And Phil Dunster, the actor who portrays him, has done a fabulous job of, you know, taking his character from where he was, this egocentric prick, to being a team leader prick.
Yes.
Now. And it's just such a wonderful job.
If he doesn't get an Emmy this year, okay, he has been so overlooked, I think, in the past couple. Season 1, I get it. Okay, I kind of get it. Season 2, come on. No Emmy now? Come on. If he doesn't get it, it's rigged. I'm just saying.
No, that's true.
But no, great growth. Oh my gosh. I mean, it just shows you not give up on anybody. Don't give up on it. There's good inside all of us. And that brings us to our next point, Nate, right? A lot of Nate in this episode. He's been kind of in and out for the past few episodes. But we really see him a lot in this one. And he's thinking about asking our girl out on a date. And, you know, he's asking he asks Siri, he asks his mom, how do you know if a girl likes you? I don't know. You just got to take a leap of faith. And we see finally his niece comes into play, the one who he keeps making those cute boxes with from season 1. You know, everything comes back around. Like, if you didn't watch season 1 or it was so long ago, those boxes that he made, you probably didn't remember them. But we see him make one. And then we learn that his dad is actually sort of a little hopeless romantic too. Whenever he asked his mom out, you talk about that.
So I thought it was really cool that they actually showed Nate's family, because it gave us more of a sense of, you know, this is where he came from. This is what, you know, this is how Nate that we know and love grew up to be, is because of the guidance of his mom, his sis. I think it's his older sister, his sister, and his father. And so that's what's all made and shaped Nate into the man that we know, not the Rupert version of him.
Right.
But seeing that, like you said, that he's trying to ask Jade out, he can't build up the confidence. And there was a moment when he goes into the bathroom and he's looking in the mirror, which is a callback to, he's done that before, but he didn't spit this time. And I
Mm,
thought that was so perfect because I would have been mad if he'd spit again because that's,
same.
that's just like not necessary, I think. And maybe he learned that, I don't need to be that person anymore.
Yeah, that or also I think it's deeper than that too. I think he actually is okay with his reflection. He's okay
There.
with it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Like he's in a good spot. I think he's very clearly starting to realize that Rupert isn't who he thinks he was.
Hmm.
And you see that when he tries to talk to Ted in the elevator and even at the end of the game, I think he's starting to sort of peel back those layers and realize I don't really want to be this guy that I was with Rupert. So he's sort of going down his own path. And I think
Yeah.
he, like you said, looks into the mirror, doesn't feel the need to spit at his reflection, doesn't need to become this person, but just okay with, hey, I'm like a nice guy
Hmm.
and I'm gonna be a nice guy, but I'm gonna be confident. And he does sort of remember Rebecca and what Rebecca said to him. Sometimes I just gotta make myself big. So what an important thing to know at himself. So then what happens next? Does she say yes?
Well, so he makes a lavish box to try and ask her out, which mimics to what his father did for his mom and this whole big map, whatnot. And which I thought was interesting that they use miles instead of kilometers because
Okay. I was gonna say that too, bro. Okay, so we know he's a cartographer, right? So
hmm
he maps for those who don't know. So distances are very important, but we don't use the kilometers here in the US,
right.
but they use that over there. So I think that was they're pretty good about keeping the references in London English versus American English. But there's two instances in the show, or three instances, where I think the writers forget. One, they haven't been calling the bathroom the loo.
Okay.
Two, they didn't say happy Christmas, they said Merry Christmas. And three, they said miles. So those are just fun little Easter eggs that they the show is really great at being detail oriented, but those ones were kind of like, oh, they sort of forgot, but it's okay. So, anyways, go ahead.
So he makes this lavish box that you referenced that he's been making for his niece, but he makes it for Jade. And as he going to deliver it, he trips and falls, of course, and it goes into the middle of the street. Then it ends up getting ran over, and so she
They
sees
didn't have
him.
to do that. They didn't have to do that.
No, they didn't have to. But she sees him, and I guess he seizes the moment, asks her out on a date, and she says yes. So I thought that was really cool. Another little thing I noticed every morning, it seemed like whenever they played the cool music, everyone waking up and the cool songs. There was one morning when he wasn't there, and she went out and she was looking for him, and she was like, "Whoa, I guess he's not coming by this morning." So I thought that was really interesting.
Ooh, that's a good observation.
Yeah,
Huh.
and so she says yes, and they end up going on a date. He thought he was going to get stood up, but she shows up, and they have a nice evening there. So I thought that was really nice. I like that.
That was he needed that, right?
Hmm.
I don't think any of us expected it. Going back to him first meeting Jade, I never was thinking like, oh yeah, they're gonna end up together. Nope, not once. But I think it's also funny to think how at that family dinner, his sister's like, oh, are you hooking up with all these girls left and right? And he's like, no, that's not who I am, bro. Like, so I think in that instance, he has sort of stayed the same. And then we see this, like he did go out with the supermodel, didn't go well, but then he goes out with Jade and it just goes so wonderfully. So I
Yeah.
think again, Nate is totally redeemable and we're seeing that.
Hmm.
I think it was a great addition to his story arc, his character development. I didn't think it was going to go that way, but I'm very glad it did. So that made me happy.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a great episode. I think we got a lot of good, funny points and a lot of redeemable moments, a lot of heartfelt moments, a lot of um, open-ended moments for the next episode coming up.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that wraps up this little Ted talking Ted, unless you have anything else you want to throw in there.
Last thing, I promise. So before even season 3, I think maybe we've talked about this before, I don't know, but we've talked about the red string theory, or at least that has been sort of heavily talked about in the Twitter sphere, about Ted and Rebecca possibly being these soulmates.
Okay.
And so a lot of people on Twitter, I think, and there's this artist, her name is like Hannah G or something, I can't remember her name. She has this really cool picture that she created with Ted, his pinky tied to Rebecca's, but they're like, they don't know where this other end of the string leads to. So, but it's really cool. So it's just funny because I sort of think that they had this plan the whole time, but how funny is it that, viewers were already thinking this? And if you notice, when Keely and Rebecca are talking about Jack at the restaurant, and Jack pays for their food, which was just great because once Rebecca finds out, who's also a multimillionaire, by the way, she orders like a tiramisu and like 4 $700 expensive wines, like, oh, Jack's paying for it, then let's get this. I thought that was hilarious. But the whole scene, she's wearing a ring that we have not seen her wear yet. And that ring is, some people say, a lasso. Or technically a knot, right? It was a knot.
Okay.
It looked like a string tied around her finger in a bow, like in a knot. And she's messing with it, right? The whole time talking to Keely. So some people are a reference, obviously, to the strings that bind us, but also where does her string lead? Does it lead back to Dutch Guy? Does it lead back to Ted? I don't know. I'm just gonna drop the mic and walk away there. That for you guys to think about. I'm just saying the small details matter, people, even down to the outfits and accessories. So that's all I have to say. I'll let y'all chew on that one.
There you go. You can gnaw on that to next week. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be back next week to chat more things Ted Lasso. And yeah, we'll see you then. Make sure to leave comments. Let us know your thoughts on all of the stuff we talked about. Maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't. Let us know. All right. Bye, everyone.